Kind of ruins the point of the title, don't you think?
It's brimstone.
Yeah, right, brimstone.
So I have a love of physical media. I really believe in owning the media that you love. I've done many videos on DVD collecting. I love cartoon and animation DVDs. But something I've never really gotten into is video games. I've not talked about video games before on this channel. And I have several reasons why. And I just thought I'd talk about it today because eventually it's going to come up. I mean, after all, I grew up in the 2000s and was practically raised on video games. Video games feature some of my favorite furry and anthro characters. I grew up on the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, the OG Xbox. I was a toy guy most of my life. I was really into action figures, but my older sibling was the gamer. So I got to borrow many of those game consoles and play them. And through that, I discovered all these games. The earliest video game I can remember playing was Super Smash Bros. Melee for the GameCube. This would have been like 2003, I think. I remember being like 3 years old and just amazed by all these characters. I mained Falco because I thought he was cool, and by then, you know, everything should have been explained, right? I fell in love with Star Fox. I adore the Star Fox games. I still think they're all amazing. I especially love Adventures. I know it's kind of the black sheep, but I think it's an awesome game. And, yeah, all sorts of great furry characters come from games. There's Tail Consorto, which is kind of a classic among cult furry circles, and there's many others. So, where's the games? I do have some games. I try to keep copies of my favorites, as you can see here, but generally speaking, I stay away from hardcore video game collecting. Now, if we rewind the clock about 10 years or so, when I was 14 or 15, I was really into video game collecting. When I became a teenager, I was just done with action figures, so I sold all my toys and began to invest in video game collecting. As many people did during this time, I got very into the game collecting hype cycle. And I really got into it. I was buying Wii U, I was buying Wii, and I was trying to predict which games I think would be worth a lot of money. And therein lied the problem with video game collecting. I built up this big collection and realized I wasn't actually playing these games and enjoying them. I was just investing in them. And at that point, why not just get into stock trading, right? And I think that's unfortunately what video game collecting has become, because I thought it was bad 10 years ago when GameCube games were going for $40 to $50 when they retailed for $15 to $20. I mean, I bought The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker at the Tyler Galleria Mall in Riverside, California. This was like 2008, 9, so this was like kind of dipping my toe, getting into those preteen years. I think I paid $15 for the game. And by 2015, 2016, it was like a $50 game. And now GameCube games are going for way more than that. I mean, Chibi Robo. Who remembers Chibi Robo? I loved that game as a kid. I was obsessed. I made my dad sculpt me Chibi Robo clay figures because there were no toys at the time. Now there's a Chibi Robo toy, go figure. But that's a $400 to $500 video game now.
Editor's note, during the production of this video, the market on this game actually fell through, and it dropped from $400 to now about $190 to $215, which is still overpriced and crazy, and just kind of proves my point about how video games go up and down like stock prices at this point.
For no good reason other than speculation. And unfortunately, I think video game collecting has become a lot like comic book collecting in the 90s, or even Star Wars action figure collecting about 10 years ago, when people were really just investing and treating these things like stocks instead of pricing them at what they're worth. You know, with action figure collecting, the market can be a little crazy, but I think for the most part, things have really subsided to where an action figure will only be worth money if it's something people want, even if there's plenty of it available. So, for instance, Boba Fett. Boba Fett's a popular character. Any action figure of Boba Fett is going to command a premium because people like him. Doesn't matter how many of them there are. Versus something like gorgeous creatures. the Mattel Cow Lady. Fashion doll, kind of action figure-like, you know. This is a very, very rare doll. They don't come up for sale often. But when they do, they don't go for a ton of money. Because it's not something people really want. And that's how a free market should work. But with video game collecting, I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like terrible video games that there's plenty of copies of are worth tons of money for no reason other than speculation. And the funny thing is companies have now gotten wise to this, and they're reprinting and re-releasing these games. Tons of old games are being re-released, which tells me that the market is going to crash really, really soon with lots of reproductions out there. It's just like what's happened with Kenner Star Wars. They made reproductions and started reproducing these toys, and the value came down. Same thing with He-Man. I would argue about 15 years ago, video games was not something the mainstream public had even accepted yet. It still wasn't cool to collect video games. But with the rise of, pulp culture becoming mainstream, video game movies making billions of dollars, and even incredibly talented YouTubers, like Scott the Woz and the Angry Video Game Nerd, if you want to go back, they created video game collecting. They made it cool. They made you realize these things have worth, and like action figures, like DVDs, like vinyl records, it's worth having a set of video games on your shelf. But I just think the value went up to a point where, I could buy this amount of action figures, books, and comics, or one video game, That's how I see it. Of course, I still somehow ended up with a bunch of video games. This is just a selection of what I have. I just thought I'd talk about some fun ones. So I do have games, but it's not something I'm prioritizing or going after. First, I did just want to talk. I love video games, but I'm not good at them. I'm terrible at video games. And so many times I end up having to use cheat codes or cheating to get through them. Even as a young kid, I bought something called Action Replay, which basically was a homebrew device that broke open your GameCube and allowed you to install mods and change the game. And that's what I would do. That's how I would beat games. I never even beat the Wind Waker. I just bought Action Replay and modded the game to my liking. So, I've always been that kind of person, and I eventually did ditch consoles and become a full-on PC gamer. I know, just because it allows you to customize games. I think the greatest video game ever made is Gary's Mod, a game you can't even physically own, because it's a template. You can mod it and make whatever you want. If I want to be Judy Hopps and fight the Xenomorph, I can do that. But I've always loved the cartoon characters of games, and video game adaptions in the animated form have been a long-time favorite. I try to get all the Sonic DVDs, because I've always thought Sonic made for a better cartoon than a video game. Yeah, the Sonic games are really good. I especially love the Genesis ones. I had to pick up the Sonic Origins collection, but I always liked Sonic as a cartoon, so very happy Sonic finally made it to the big screen and is seeing success with the Netflix show and lots of new Sonic cartoons. Even this re-release is great. This is called Sonic Origins. It just came out. It includes all the classic Sonic games, but with hand-drawn, animated cutscenes in the middle. So they took the 4 original Genesis games and they stitched them together as one single game with animated cutscenes, putting it much more in line with the cartoon and like something they would have liked to release in the 90s had the tech been there. So this is a great release, and once I bought this, I didn't see need to buy all the Genesis Sonic games. I basically have them. Often I go for classic collections on modern consoles. I like to play my games like I do with DVDs, so if there's a re-release available, a way to get these classic games today, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. And by the way, the Spyro re-release, this is the best classic re-release. This is an amazing collection. They're so much better than the originals. I'm sorry, purists, but this is the way to go.
Well, hello there, Mr. Dragon. You're pretty cute for a quadruped.
These games, these remasters are amazing. They actually fixed the games and improved them. So, PlayStation 4 is my go-to console because I use it as a DVD player and I watch my movies with that. Plus, it's just simple and easy. Like Skyrim, honestly, this is the only video game I'll ever need. There's so much to do and see in Skyrim. It's like a whole fantasy world. I owned a Nintendo Switch. That was the tail end of my video game collecting, was the Switch launch. So up until 2017, I was kind of all in on video games. I was buying games I was told to invest in. I was buying JRPGs and fighting games, stuff I didn't even like because I was told I would make money off of it, which was so dumb. My teenage self was just dumb. But I went all in on the Switch launch. I got the Splatoon Edition console, Splatoon 2, Mario Odyssey, and a bunch of the other games, and the Joy-Cons almost immediately broke on me. The first batch of Nintendo Switches were faulty, and the Joy-Cons broke. I called Nintendo, and they told me I would have to send my console back to them, and the whole thing would get wiped, so I'd lose all my data, and it would cost me $90 to do so. So at that point, I told them no, I told them to stick it, and I've been PlayStation ever since. What's funny is about a week after I ditched Nintendo and finally jumped the ship to Sony, a court ruled against Nintendo and told them that they had to replace all of the faulty Joy-Cons for free. So, you know, I wasn't mad, I just figured it was meant to be. And if that Joy-Con thing was like the straw that broke the camel's back, that finally made me get out of video game collecting, then it was totally worth it. Because I went back to collecting toys and books and embracing my inner furriness. Now, occasionally I still pick up games, especially ones I know that I only have one shot at getting. For instance, here is Crash Bandicoot for the original PlayStation. I love the characters of Crash, I have a lot of the toys, and I bought the remastered collection for the PlayStation, and there was no reason for me to hunt down the original Crash games. They're very expensive, but I saw this at the thrift store for $1, and I know a black label Crash Bandicoot is really, really expensive. Now this one, I understand the value behind this actually, because not only is Crash a popular game, it's a good game. If you're on original PlayStation, this is a good one, but this is a black label release of Bandicoot, and I know Crash Bandicoot very quickly sold millions of units and got the, I think it's called the green label release, when PlayStation games sell so many copies. So this is kind of like a first edition of a popular book. This is the original release before the game got popular and was re-released at lower price points. So this is a fun one to have. This is the game of the year. Seriously, game of the year. I did a YouTube short not too long ago where I said this was the game of the year, Shark Tale for PC. You should have seen the private messages I got. People were so nasty, oh my goodness. But it wasn't like you viewers, it was like normies, like gamer people, like real, like video game people that were like, you don't know what you're talking about. Elden Ring's the game of the year. You're just putting out some 2000s game. What are you talking about? Like, it's a joke, people, it's a joke. But the video game community can be pretty cutthroat, to be honest. So I like my own furry niche, kind of talking about furry action figures and toys. And I think the final reason I stay away from video game collecting on this channel is it's all been done. There's no reason to talk about what great games are undiscovered and not out there, because there's so many amazing YouTubers out there that talk about video game collecting. Scott the Woz is probably my favorite. Not his main Scott the Woz channel, that's good, but his second channel called Scott's Stash, where he literally just stands in front of a carpet and talks about video games in his collection. What they mean to him, different versions, different variations. I would say it's the definitive video game collecting channel. It's that good, and he does get the views he deserves. Now, there should be millions and millions of hits because it's amazing, but it is a fairly popular channel. I also love the classic Angry Video Game Nerd episodes, and I watch a lot of the Pixel Game Squad. They're a fun bunch of YouTubers. They go to flea markets and they pick and hunt for games. And, I do learn what games are valuable and what to kind of look for on a general basis. But it's not like I'm shifting through bins of video games. I think the market at this point is just too hot. People know what they have, people know what video games go for, and the days of finding complete whale and box games for cheap is kind of beyond us. Everyone knows at this point, versus something like, collecting cartoon action figures. It's a niche, you don't see a lot of it. I made this channel out of my frustration that there was no guide to collecting furry toys and action figures. But video game collecting, I've always known, you go for Solitaire Robo, Tail Consorto, the Sonic games, the Star Fox games. You know, but at this point, what isn't known about game collecting? All the gems have kind of been discovered. But with action figures, you know, no one out there is telling you that Doctor Strange has the best Minotaur action figure, or that Subway actually had figures of Cats Don't Dance. Even just furry, but fantasy and cartoon as a whole. There's like no videos on collecting Shrek action figures. And Shrek had, what, 3 action figures lines? And I love Shrek toys. I just think the Shrek characters make for excellent figures. But oddly enough, Shrek video games, if you want a full breakdown on any Shrek game, just YouTube it. There's amazing documentaries about the Shrek games. Some really, really good ones covering the full history of these games and the stories behind them. I'm actually going to highly recommend Rebel Taxi's video on the original Shrek game, which is based on an early version of the Shrek script and includes extra characters and scenes not in the movie. So yes, I do consider video games to be important physical media, especially as we enter a soon scary discless age. It's starting to look like PS4 and 5 might be the last, you know, disc-based consoles. So I will play and enjoy PS4, probably upgrade to PS5 down the line, and take my backwards compatibility library with me. But if the PS6 doesn't have discs, then I'm not interested. I'm just gonna stick with my laptop gaming at that point, because downloads are just easier on PC, and for consoles, I like to own games. I think it's like movies. You look at the case, you look at the booklet, and you appreciate a good, solid, physical release. So, let me know where you stand on video game collecting. Has it gotten too crazy and expensive? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's worth it. Maybe video game collecting is so popular for a reason. But as it stands right now, I think the hype is just a little too crazy. Maybe I'll get back into the market when it cools down a little. Because I would like to have all my vintage GameCube games I loved as a kid. Some of those games mean a lot to me. But, you know, Chibi Robo, good memories. $400 good memories? No. So in the meantime, I'll just stick to the only 2 games I'll need. Skyrim for the PS4 and Shark Tale for the PC.